I stared in shock at Brandon's iPad lighting up on the hotel nightstand. It was 11:42 at night. A text preview from his sister-in-law Marla appeared across the screen. Still tastes like guilt. Don't marry her unless you're ready to lie every day. My heart stopped. My hands started shaking. I heard the hotel bathroom door open. Brandon was walking back into the room, humming softly. I had maybe 3 seconds to decide what to do. My body moved before my brain caught up. I swiped up on the iPad and began scrolling through his messages with Marla. Photos. Conversations. Plans. Everything I'd suspected but couldn't prove was right there in my hands. He walked in, drying his hands on a towel, and stopped. "What are you doing with my iPad?" he asked. His voice was casual but his eyes weren't. I felt pure panic beneath my calm mask. I smiled at Brandon and handed the iPad back like nothing was wrong. "Just checking the time," I said smoothly. My phone died. He seemed to accept this and set the iPad back on the nightstand. Inside, I was spiraling completely. My mind raced through everything I'd just seen in those 30 seconds of scrolling. I excused myself, said I needed some air, and rushed into the hallway. My entire future was collapsing around me and I was supposed to marry this man in less than 12 hours. I leaned against the wall trying to breathe. Then I remembered something. Brandon and I shared an Apple ID for family purchases. That meant his iPad was synced to my phone. I opened my Messages app with shaking fingers and began screen recording everything on his device remotely. Every conversation. Every photo. Every lie. My name is Kara Walsh. I'm 29 years old and tomorrow I was supposed to marry Brandon Hayes, the man I'd dated for 3 years. The proposal had been perfect, like something from a movie. He'd taken me to the beach where we had our first date, got down on one knee at sunset, and promised me forever. His family had welcomed me with open arms, or so I thought. His mother called me such a sweet girl and said I was exactly what Brandon needed. His brother's wife Marla had been friendly and warm. I thought marrying into the Hayes family would finally give me the family I'd always wanted. I didn't know I was walking into a trap. I didn't know that the two people I was trying hardest to impress had been betraying me from the beginning. Growing up, I never really had a family. My mother left when I was 6. My father remarried quickly to a woman who tolerated me but never loved me. I learned early to be the good girl, the peacemaker, the one who never caused problems. I stayed quiet, got good grades, and made myself as small and undemanding as possible. When I met Brandon's family for the first time, I was desperate for their approval. His mother looked me over carefully at that first dinner and said something I thought was a compliment. "I'm so glad you're not high maintenance like his last one." Everyone laughed. Brandon squeezed my hand under the table. I smiled and said I was just happy to be there. Now I understood what she really meant. I wasn't high maintenance because I didn't ask questions or demand respect. I was easy to manipulate. I met Marla, Brandon's sister-in-law, at a family dinner 6 months into our relationship. She was magnetic and confident, the kind of woman who commanded attention just by walking into a room. She was loud and flirtatious with everyone, including Brandon. I felt awkward and dismissed next to her energy. At one point during dinner, Brandon made a joke that everyone thought was hilarious. "If Kara and I ever get divorced, I'm marrying Marla instead." The whole table laughed. Marla threw her head back and said, "You wish you could handle me." Brandon's brother, Marla's husband, just shook his head and smiled like this was normal banter. Everyone laughed except me. I forced a smile and looked down at my plate, feeling small and replaceable. That joke haunted me for months afterward. Now I knew it wasn't really a joke at all. The first real red flag came 9 months ago. Brandon had a sudden business trip with his brother. They were going to meet with potential investors in another city, he said. He'd be gone for 3 days. The second day, he sent me a selfie from what he claimed was a business dinner. But in the background, I could see Marla. Just a glimpse of her distinctive red hair and the necklace she always wore. When I asked about it, Brandon said it was pure coincidence. Her company has clients in the same city. Small world. His explanation was smooth and reasonable. But something in my gut said it was wrong. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. I ordered a GPS tracker online, and when Brandon got home, I slipped it under his car's seat while he was in the shower. I told myself I was being paranoid. But I needed to know the truth. I finally confronted Brandon directly about my concerns 2 weeks after the business trip. I asked if there was something going on between him and Marla. His reaction shocked me. Instead of being defensive or reassuring, he flipped everything back on me. "You're being insane," he said coldly. "This is exactly why my last relationship ended. Too much jealousy and insecurity." He made me feel crazy for even asking. He accused me of having trust issues and said my childhood abandonment was making me see problems that didn't exist. Then he said something that cut deep. "You're lucky someone like me is even willing to marry you, considering how damaged you are." I apologized. Actually apologized for questioning him. I felt grateful he wasn't breaking up with me. Now I see it clearly. That was gaslighting. That was manipulation. That was him controlling the narrative so I'd stop asking questions. When Brandon's mother insisted on a prenuptial agreement, I felt cornered and uncomfortable. The meeting with lawyers was tense. Brandon's family attorney presented a document that heavily favored the Hayes family. If we divorced, I'd get almost nothing despite contributing equally to our life together. I felt trapped, but I signed it. What Brandon's family didn't know was that I'd quietly hired my own lawyer after that gaslighting conversation. My attorney reviewed the prenup and found something interesting. She helped me add a clause that Brandon's lawyer didn't catch or understand the significance of. The clause stated that all prenup protections were void if either party could prove infidelity or fraud occurring before the wedding date. Brandon's mother glanced over it and approved it, thinking it protected her son. She had no idea it would destroy him. I found the first indisputable proof 3 months before our wedding. While doing laundry, I emptied Brandon's jacket pockets and found a receipt. It was for a luxury bed and breakfast, a romantic weekend getaway. 2 nights, couples massage package, champagne upgrade. The dates made my blood run cold. It was during the weekend Brandon claimed he was visiting his sick cousin in another state. He'd shown me photos of the hospital, sent me updates about his cousin's condition. All lies. When I looked up the bed and breakfast location, it was 2 hours away in wine country. I took photos of the receipt from every angle and stored them in a hidden folder on my phone. I didn't confront him. Instead, I started collecting evidence systematically. I needed an airtight case before I made my move. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Dolores and she was recommended by my lawyer. I met her at a coffee shop far from our neighborhood and explained the situation quietly. She didn't judge or try to talk me out of it. She just took notes and said she'd start immediately. For 2 months, Dolores followed Brandon and documented everything. She tracked his movements, photographed his meetings, and compiled a comprehensive dossier. Then one evening, I received an email from her with the subject line, "You may want to sit down before opening this." My hands shook as I clicked. The attachment was password protected. I entered the code she'd given me and waited for the file to load. I was sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot. When the images appeared, I had to grip the steering wheel to keep from screaming. The folder Dolores sent contained everything. Photos of Brandon and Marla at restaurants, holding hands across tables. Hotel records showing they'd checked in together multiple times using Brandon's credit card. Security camera footage from a parking garage showing them kissing passionately before getting into his car. Text message logs that made me feel sick. But the worst photo was time-stamped. Brandon and Marla embracing outside a jewelry store. The date was 2 days before Brandon proposed to me. 2 days before he got down on one knee and promised me forever. They'd been together right before he bought my engagement ring. The affair wasn't a recent mistake or a moment of weakness. It had been going on for over a year, spanning our entire engagement. He'd been planning to marry me while sleeping with his brother's wife. The betrayal was so complete and deliberate that I almost couldn't process it. Now we were back in the present, the night before our wedding. The rehearsal dinner had been beautiful. Guests laughed and toasted to our future. Marla had hugged me, her perfume expensive and cloying. "You're going to make such a beautiful bride tomorrow," she said warmly. I hugged her back tightly and whispered in her ear, "So are you." She pulled back looking confused. I just smiled. The wedding machine was in full motion around us. Flowers were being arranged. The cake was being delivered. My dress hung perfectly pressed in my hotel room. To everyone else, everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Nobody knew what I knew. Nobody suspected what I'd discovered. They were all celebrating while I stood at the center of it, calm and cold and ready to burn it all down. At the rehearsal dinner, Brandon made a heartfelt toast. He talked about how lucky he was to have found me, about building a life together, about the family we'd create. His voice caught with emotion. People dabbed at their eyes. My hands shook under the table where nobody could see them. I looked around at all these people who had no idea they were witnessing an elaborate lie. Brandon's mother beamed with pride. His brother smiled obliviously. Marla watched Brandon with an expression I now recognized as longing. When Brandon finished his toast, he leaned over and kissed me. I kissed him back and whispered against his lips, "To our future." I meant it differently than he thought. Our future was about to look very different than he imagined. Tomorrow would change everything. Later that evening, I saw Brandon sneak away from the party with his phone. His movements were subtle, but I'd been watching for them. I followed him discreetly down a hallway, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice. He ducked behind a curtained alcove near the hotel's event space. I approached quietly and positioned myself where I could see through a gap in the fabric. Marla was already there waiting for him. They were whispering and laughing together, touching each other in ways that were unmistakably intimate. His hand on her waist. Her fingers tracing his collar. I watched for 30 seconds, burned the image into my memory, then pulled out my phone and took 3 photos without flash. Clear, damning, time-stamped. Then I smiled to myself and walked away. I didn't need to confront them. I had everything I needed. Let them think they'd gotten away with it one more night. At 2 in the morning, I met my lawyer at the hotel's 24-hour business center. I was still in my rehearsal dinner dress. She was in casual clothes, having driven from her home in the middle of the night because I'd called and said it was urgent. I showed her everything. The iPad messages I'd screen recorded. The photos from tonight. The entire dossier from the private investigator. She reviewed it all carefully, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. Then she pulled out papers she'd prepared weeks ago, just in case. Annulment documents. Financial separation agreements. Evidence packets ready to file. Once you're married, she said quietly, and then you file for annulment based on fraud, that prenup clause kicks in. He's going to lose everything. I signed where she indicated. Tomorrow would be a wedding. The day after would be a reckoning. Wedding morning arrived bright and clear. Brandon was glowing with happiness when I saw him briefly before we were separated for the traditional pre-ceremony preparation. He kissed me and said I looked beautiful. "I can't wait to marry you," he said. I smiled and said, "It's going to be unforgettable." Marla was helping with final flower arrangements, too smug and confident. She'd worn a dress that was almost too attention-grabbing for someone who wasn't the bride. But I didn't care anymore. Let her have her moment of thinking she'd won. I put on my white dress, let my bridesmaids fuss over my hair and makeup, and walked calmly to the venue. When I saw Brandon waiting at the altar, I kissed him and whispered so only he could hear, "You have no idea what's coming." He laughed, thinking it was a romantic promise about our wedding night. He had no idea what I meant. I went through with the wedding. Every vow, every smile, every "I do." The ceremony was beautiful. People cried. The officiant declared us husband and wife. Brandon kissed me in front of 200 guests and I kissed him back. We danced at the reception. Cut the cake. Toasted with champagne. I played the role of happy bride perfectly. Every "congratulations" I received felt like a private joke. Every well-wisher had no idea they were celebrating the shortest marriage in history. But inside, I was ice cold and absolutely focused. That night, as Brandon slept beside me in our honeymoon suite, exhausted from the day's celebrations, I sat up with my laptop. I finished uploading every piece of evidence to a locked cloud folder. Bank statements. Photos. Videos. Testimony. Everything organized and ready. Tomorrow morning, I would burn down the life he'd built on lies. The next morning, there was a knock at our hotel room door. Brandon was still half asleep, hair messy, wearing the hotel bathrobe. He shuffled to the door and opened it without looking through the peephole. A legal courier stood there in uniform, holding a thick manila envelope. "Brandon Hayes?" the courier asked. "Yes?" Brandon replied, confused. "You've been served," the courier said, handing over the envelope and getting a signature. Brandon stood there staring at the packet as the courier left. Behind him, I was sitting at the table sipping coffee, already dressed for the day. "What is this?" he asked, his voice rising in confusion and early panic. I took another sip of coffee and said calmly, "Open it and find out." His hands shook as he tore open the envelope. The word annulment was visible on the top page. His face went completely white. Brandon exploded. He shouted about betrayal and humiliation. He demanded to know how I could do this after everything we'd been through. "You're insane," he yelled. "This is crazy. We just got married yesterday." I stayed completely calm, which seemed to make him angrier. "You lied before the wedding," I said evenly. "That's fraud. The marriage can be annulled based on deception and infidelity. It's in the prenup clause your family's lawyer didn't read carefully enough." His face shifted from rage to something like fear. Before he could respond, there was another knock at the door. His mother stormed in without waiting for an invitation, clearly having been called by Brandon. "Kara, fix this right now," she demanded. "This is ridiculous." I walked over to my laptop bag, pulled out a flash drive, and handed it to her. "You should watch this first," I said. "Then we can talk about what's ridiculous." I also mailed copies of the evidence to Marla's husband, Brandon's brother. Photos of his wife and brother together. Hotel receipts in Brandon's name. Text messages proving the affair had lasted over a year. Time-stamped evidence showing they'd been together the day before Brandon proposed to me. I sent it all by certified mail so I'd know when he received it. 2 days after the wedding, I got the delivery confirmation. An hour later, I received an email from Brandon's brother. Just 2 words, "Thank you." 3 hours after that, I heard through mutual friends that Marla's husband had filed for divorce and kicked her out of their house. The Hayes family was imploding from the inside. Every relationship was poisoned by the truth I'd revealed. And I felt nothing but cold satisfaction that the lies were finally in the light where everyone could see them. Brandon worked for a corporate firm with a strict morals clause in their employee contracts. Behavior that brought disrepute to the company could result in termination or demotion. I'd read his entire employment contract months ago. Now I forwarded carefully selected screenshots and evidence summaries to the company's human resources department. Nothing graphic, just enough to show a pattern of dishonesty and poor judgment. The email was anonymous but thorough. Within a week, Brandon received notice that his upcoming promotion to senior partner was being rescinded. The letter cited violation of conduct standards and placed him on professional probation. His career trajectory, which he'd worked years to build, was suddenly frozen. His mother called me screaming about ruining her son's life. I didn't answer. I'd already blocked her number. They'd spent years building their perfect family image. I'd torn it down in 72 hours. The wedding expenses hit Brandon hard. The venue, catering, flowers, band, photographer, everything had been in his name because he'd insisted on handling it like a proper gentleman. Now he was responsible for $64,000 in non-refundable charges for a marriage that lasted less than 24 hours. His credit cards maxed out. His credit score tanked when he couldn't make the payments. His mother had to sell her vacation condo to bail him out financially. Every time I heard about another consequence he was facing, I felt a grim satisfaction. He'd stolen years of my life with his lies. He'd planned to trap me in a marriage while continuing his affair. He'd made me doubt my own sanity with gaslighting. Now he was paying a price that actually meant something. Not just emotional pain, but real, tangible consequences that would follow him for years. Marla's life collapsed entirely. Her husband got primary custody of their 2 children after presenting the evidence I'd provided showing her pattern of deception and poor judgment. She lost her job when the scandal became public knowledge in their social circles. She deleted all her social media accounts after being bombarded with messages from people who'd heard what happened. I received one last email from her 3 months after the wedding. The subject line was empty. The message said only, "You destroyed me." I read it once, then deleted it without responding. I hadn't destroyed her. She destroyed herself by choosing to have an affair with her husband's brother. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. I felt no guilt about her consequences. She'd been perfectly willing to destroy me by helping Brandon maintain his lies. Now she understood what destruction actually felt like. I used the insurance payout from the annulment and Brandon's financial settlement to open something new. A grief and betrayal recovery center for women going through divorces, annulments, or escaping manipulative relationships. I called it New Beginnings Counseling. My first clients were women whose stories sounded heartbreakingly similar to mine. Women who'd been gaslit, manipulated, made to doubt their own perceptions. I hired therapists and lawyers to work together under one roof. We helped women document abuse, collect evidence, and rebuild their lives after betrayal. At the end of my first counseling session, I shared something that became the center's unofficial motto: sometimes walking away is the loudest thing you can do. And sometimes burning it all down on your way out is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. The women in the room nodded. They understood completely. 1 year after the wedding that wasn't really a wedding, Brandon sent me an email. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for exactly 3 seconds, then deleted it without reading the message. I was standing on the deck of my new home, a small house I'd bought by a lake 2 hours from the city. The morning was quiet and peaceful. No drama, no lies, no manipulation. Just me, coffee, and the sound of water lapping against the shore. Brandon never forgave me for what I did. His family never forgave me. Some mutual friends thought I'd gone too far, been too cruel, too calculating. But I'd never needed their forgiveness. That night before our wedding, when I started screen recording his iPad messages, I chose myself. I chose truth over comfort. I chose freedom over the fake family I'd been desperate to belong to. He'll never forgive me. But I would absolutely do it again. Every single time. Without hesitation. Because I finally learned that loving yourself means refusing to accept a life built on someone else's lies.